I tried
Give
to
it
steal
back!
a bag from
Negative.
a
The
human
backpack
courier.
is mine.
17 spectral
Error.
vision,
Recalculated.
15 years of experience. I had never failed. Until Ren Halsey. That bag held proof of a conspiracy to kill 40,000 people in 72 hours. The charges were already in place. The countdown had begun. And that human courier, she was the only one fast enough, smart enough, stubborn enough to stop it. My name is Vex Thalen. I'm a scalpel thief who thought humans were easy marks. I was wrong. This is the story of how trying to rob the wrong woman saved 40,000 lives, exposed a government conspiracy, and changed everything I thought I knew about myself. The galaxy thought humans were weak, sentimental, slow. They were wrong about that too. This is how I learned why. My name is Vex Thalen, and I want it known for the official record that none of this was my idea. I am a scalpel. We are a proud species. 4 arms, silver gray skin, with the texture of polished granite and eyes that can see 17 different spectrums of light. We are fast. We are clever. We are, according to our own cultural mythology, among the most gifted opportunists in the known galaxy. I say opportunists because thieves sound so uncharitable. The story I am about to tell you happened on the trade station Vorik Neth, which orbits a dim orange star at the edge of what the humans call the Orion Spur. Vorik Neth is what you might generously call a lively station. What you might less generously call it involves words I will not repeat here because my translator still has not recovered from the last time someone used them in close proximity to its audio receptor. It is the kind of place where you mind your own business, where you look at the floor when you walk, where you do not ask questions about what is in someone's cargo container, why that merchant has 3 different names depending on which side of the station you meet him on, or why the security personnel always seem to be looking in the wrong direction at exactly the right time. Vorik Neth is, in short, my kind of place. Or so I thought. I had been working the lower market corridor for 6 standard rotations. Good work, honestly. Clean work. A bag here, a credit chip there, the occasional piece of jewelry lifted from a distracted tourist who was too busy photographing the bioluminescent fungal displays to notice a 4-armed scalpel with very quick fingers walking past them at a casual stroll. Nothing violent, nothing messy. I had a code, you understand, a professional standard. My partner that rotation was Pim Terrell, a Thoric, which means he was short green, had the moral compass of a hungry piranha, and absolutely zero situational awareness. Pim was the kind of person you brought along, not because he was useful, but because when things went wrong, at least you had someone slower than you to leave behind. I say this not with malice, but with the deep, weary affection of someone who had spent too many rotations in his company. The lower market corridor stretched nearly half a kilometer through Section 3 of the station. Overhead exposed conduits dripped coolant in irregular rhythms. The deck plates were scuffed to a dull gray from decades of foot traffic. Vendor stalls lined both sides, selling everything from preserved rations to counterfeit identification chips to things I genuinely could not identify and did not want to. The air smelled like ozone and fried protein and the particular staleness that comes from recycled atmosphere that has been recycled too many times. It was morning shift station time. The corridor was busy but not crowded. Ideal conditions, enough people to blend into. Not so many that you could not move quickly when you needed to. I was standing near a vendor selling what he claimed were genuine Terrellian data crystals, but which I knew for a fact were colored glass, when Pim clicked his tongue against his teeth in that way that meant he had spotted something. I followed his gaze down the corridor. That is when I first saw her. The human. Now I need to pause here and give you some context about humans, because if you are reading this account without prior exposure to the species, you are not prepared. Nobody is ever prepared. That is arguably the entire problem. Humans had arrived at the galactic community roughly 40 standard years prior, which in cosmic terms is the equivalent of someone showing up extremely late to a party, loudly announcing they have brought their own food, and then somehow ending up running the grill. The rest of the galaxy had spent centuries building careful diplomatic frameworks, trade agreements, and mutual understanding protocols. Humans had spent those same centuries apparently doing push-ups and inventing spicy food and developing something called competitive sports, which when explained to me made a Granny elder sitting nearby quietly excuse himself and go lie down in a dark room. They were odd. They were unpredictable. They smiled with all their teeth, which every other species in the galaxy understood as a threat display, but which humans insisted was a sign of friendliness. The cognitive dissonance alone gave me headaches, and they were, according to every piece of intelligence that had filtered through the criminal networks I operated in, very, very easy marks. Distracted, sentimental, trusting to the point of absurdity. They carried these large bags filled with what other species would consider completely useless items. Photographs of family members, small stuffed fabric toys, handwritten notes. None of it had monetary value. All of it had enormous emotional value, which meant the humans would be too upset about losing it to immediately think clearly about chasing you. That was the theory. The human walking down the lower market corridor of Vorik Neth was named, I later discovered, Ren Halsey. She was young by human standards, mid-20s perhaps. She had dark hair tied back in what I now know humans call a ponytail, though the visual similarity to any pony I have seen is questionable at best. She was wearing clothes that were slightly too casual for the station environment. The kind of worn jacket and comfortable trousers that suggested she was either very experienced at traveling or did not particularly care what anyone thought of her appearance. She was carrying a large canvas bag over one shoulder. That bag. I cannot emphasize enough how much that bag would come to define the next 72 hours of my life. Look at the weight of it, Pim breathed. She is barely noticing it. Must be full of something. She looks alert, I said. And she did. Her eyes were moving, which I noted most tourists did not do. Most tourists looked at things. This one was looking at the space between things, which was either the behavior of someone experienced or someone paranoid. And honestly, in my line of work, the distinction mattered enormously. She is a human, Pim said with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone very slow. They do not notice anything. They are walking around half asleep most of the time. I heard one of them accidentally started a diplomatic incident last cycle because they thought the Vorican ambassador's ceremonial headdress was a hat being sold at a market stall and tried to buy it. That story does not make me more confident, Pim. It makes me think humans are chaotic in ways I cannot predict. 50 credits says you cannot take that bag without her noticing. I looked at him. That is not an incentive. That is a dare. Yes, he said, and this is the moment I should have walked away. I want you to know that I, Vex Thalen, senior opportunist, recognize the existence of this moment. I saw it clearly the way you see a warning sign on a road. I saw it and I evaluated it, and then for reasons I can only attribute to professional pride and also Pim Terrell's extremely irritating smirk, walked toward it anyway. I started moving. I had a technique. 15 years of practiced technique. You approach from behind and to the left, matching the target's pace exactly so that your footsteps overlap with theirs and become inaudible. Then as you pass your hands, all four of them, moving in pre-rehearsed coordination, unhook the bag strap, take the weight, and redirect it in a single fluid motion that the target does not register until you are already 12 meters away and picking up speed. It was beautiful when it worked. I was 6 meters behind Ren Halsey. 4 meters. 2. I reached out. What happened next is something I have replayed in my memory approximately 400 times, and each time I do, I find a new detail that makes it somehow worse. The bag strap was in my hand. I had it for exactly 0.3 seconds. The plan was working perfectly, and I was already calculating how quickly I could get to the secondary exit corridor. Then Ren Halsey stopped walking. Not stumbled, not paused, stopped. The way a wall stops, completely and without any preliminary warning whatsoever. And my forward momentum carried me directly into her back, except she had also in the same instant turned around, which meant I ran face first into a human woman who had apparently anticipated exactly what I was doing and had pivoted with the calm, unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this before. The bag stayed exactly where it was. My hand still gripping the strap was now being looked at by two of the darkest brown eyes I had ever seen in my life, at a distance of approximately 30 centimeters with an expression that was not the fear or confusion I had been expecting, but something far more unnerving. She looked mildly interested. Huh, she said, just that. Huh. I started. Forearms, she said, looking at me with the focused attention of someone cataloging a curiosity. Scavo right, you guys are supposed to be fast. I said again. You're supposed to be fast, she repeated. And this time there was something in her voice, not anger, not fear, something worse, amusement, the absolute confidence of someone who is not threatened in the slightest, who is in fact finding the entire situation entertaining. I pulled my hand back. She let me. You can have the bag, she said pleasantly. There's nothing in it you want. Now a smarter person would have taken this as their cue to leave quickly and quietly and spend the rest of the day in a different corridor, preferably a different section of the station. Possibly a different star system. I did not do this, because Pim from somewhere behind me said she is bluffing. Pim, I said through my teeth without turning around. Please stop talking. She is a tourist. She does not know what she has. Take the bag. Ren Halsey heard this because humans have surprisingly functional hearing for creatures that walk around making as much noise as they do. And she smiled. It was the full teeth smile. All of them. And I want to tell you that every instinct in my body, all of my 17 spectrum eyes, every sensor I had screamed at me in that moment. This is a trap, said my instincts. This is a trap, said my better judgment. This is a trap, agreed my survival instinct, my professional experience, and the small sensible voice in the back of my brain that had kept me alive for 15 years. Try it, she said. And the way she said it, calm, quiet, almost friendly, with that smile still sitting on her face like it had always lived, there was the most terrifying thing I had heard in 15 years of operating in the lowest corners of the galactic criminal ecosystem. I did not take the bag, but Pym, because Pym is Pym, had been moving up behind me. And Pym, with all the strategic intelligence of a rock thrown at a hornet's nest, grabbed the bag from the other side. The sound that happened next was not a scream. It was not a shout or a cry for help, or any of the sounds that in my extensive experience a victim makes when their property is taken. It was a very short, very sharp laugh. One single human laugh. And then Ren Halsey did something that took less than 2 seconds and ended with Pym Terrell, my partner of 6 rotations, a Thoric who weighed approximately 90 kilograms, and had 4 years of back alley brawling experience, lying on the floor of the lower market corridor of Vorik Neth, with his wrists secured behind him, using what I later learned was called a zip tie and an expression of complete existential bewilderment on his face. She had not dropped the bag. She had not raised her voice. She had not called for help. The entire market corridor had gone very suddenly, very quiet. Ren Halsey looked down at Pym. Then she looked up at me. Then she looked at the pug still on her shoulder, and then back at me again. "You want to sit down," she said, "or are you going to make this interesting?" And that is when I saw the others. Because Ren Halsey was not, as it turned out, a tourist. She was not, as it also turned out, alone. There were 3 of them. They had been in the corridor the entire time, and I had not seen them, which should tell you everything you need to know about how humans move when they do not want you to see them moving. One was leaning against a market stall 10 meters to my left. A tall man with a calm expression who I now noticed was watching me with the relaxed attention of someone waiting to see whether they needed to stand up. Another was near the secondary exit, shorter arms crossed with a look that I can only describe as professionally patient. The third, most alarmingly, was directly behind me, and I only knew this because I heard him say very quietly, very close to my left ear, "Morning." I froze. "We're not here for trouble," the one behind me said. He had a voice like river gravel, unhurried and substantial. "We're here because this corridor has been seeing a lot of activity and our employer wanted someone to take a look." I turned my head very slowly because fast movements felt like an extremely poor choice at this particular moment. He was human, mid-30s maybe. He had a short beard and the kind of eyes that have seen a significant number of things and decided not to be surprised by any of them anymore. He was holding nothing in his hands, which somehow made him more alarming than if he had been holding something. "Your friend," he said, gesturing at Pym on the floor, "is fine. Embarrassed mostly." Pym made a sound that suggested this was accurate. "Who are you people?" I managed. My voice was steadier than I expected. "I am choosing to count this as a personal victory." Ren Halsey answered. She had crouched down next to Pym and was checking his wrists with the automatic practiced care of someone making sure she had not hurt him more than necessary, which struck me as absurdly considerate given the circumstances. "We're consultants," she said. "Consultants," I repeated. "Security consultants," the man behind me clarified, "hired by the station management. There's been a significant uptick in what they're calling opportunistic property redistribution in the lower market for about 8 rotations now." That is, I started a very polite way of saying theft. "Yes," Ren said, standing back up and dusting off her hands. "We know." She looked at me with those dark eyes, and there was something in them now that had not been there before. Or maybe it had been there the entire time, and I simply had not been paying the right kind of attention. She was not angry. She was not triumphant. She looked, if anything, a little tired. The way someone looks when they have done the same job many times and are good at it, but it no longer surprises them. "You're not a bad thief," she said. "Your approach was actually pretty clean. But you hesitated twice and you let your partner give away your timing. That's sloppy." I stared at her. "She is critiquing your technique," Pym said from the floor with an air of total disbelief. I can hear that, Pim. She is critiquing your technique while I am on the floor. I am aware of both of these facts simultaneously. Ren looked between us, and I swear on every star in the Orion spur she laughed again. Not the sharp laugh from before. Something warmer. Genuine. Station security is going to be here in about 4 minutes, the man with the beard said from behind me. You can wait for them, Ren said. Or, she left the oar sitting in the air. I looked at Ren Halsey. I looked at Pim on the floor. I looked at the bag on her shoulder, which had never moved. Not once, not even when Pim had grabbed it because she had not let it move. What is in that bag? I asked. She smiled. All the teeth again. Nothing you want, she said, but also everything that matters. And outside the corridor, I could already hear the distant rhythmic sound of security boots on the station floor getting closer. 4 minutes, the bearded human had said. He was wrong. It took 3 minutes and 40 seconds, which I know because I counted every single one of them while standing in the lower market quarter of Vorik Neth, with my forearms at my sides, my dignity somewhere on the floor next to Pim Terrell, and 3 humans watching me with the patient, unhurried calm of people who had already decided how this situation was going to end and were simply waiting for me to catch up. The security team that arrived was led by a Granny officer named Jovic, a broad gray-skinned individual with the permanent expression of someone who had chosen this career in a moment of optimism that life had since corrected thoroughly. He took one look at the corridor, one look at Pim on the floor, one look at the 3 humans standing around like they owned the station. And then he looked at me. Vex Thalem, he said. Officer Jovic, I said. 3rd time this rotation cycle. I prefer to think of it as consistent employment. He stared at me for a long moment. I noticed something then, the way his eyes flicked to the humans and then away, too quickly. The way his hand moved toward his comm and then stopped. The subtle tension in his shoulders that suggested he was uncomfortable with this situation in ways that had nothing to do with catching thieves. Officer Jovic, I realized, was nervous about Ren Halsey's team. Not respectful. Nervous. I filed that observation away for later. Then he looked at Ren Halsey, who had already produced some kind of identification and was holding it out to him with the practiced ease of someone who did this regularly. Jovic looked at the identification. His expression did something complicated. It went from tired resignation, through surprised recognition, past something that looked remarkably like relief and landed somewhere in the neighborhood of cautious respect, which for Jovic was essentially the emotional equivalent of everyone else throwing a parade. You are the Halsey team, he said. We are, Ren confirmed. Station management said you were coming. I did not expect, he gestured at Pim at me at the general situation. We work fast, said the bearded man behind me. I still did not know his name. He had the kind of presence that made you feel like asking his name would be somehow presumptuous, like asking a mountain what it preferred to be called. Jovic nodded slowly. He pulled out his restraint unit and gestured at me and Pim with the resigned energy of a man who has accepted his life exactly as it is. You 2 are coming with me. Obviously. Obviously, I said. Obviously, Pim agreed from the floor with feeling. And that should have been the end of it. Arrest processing, the usual unpleasant bureaucratic experience of being cataloged and charged and eventually released with a fine I would spend the next several rotations paying off. I had been through it before. I knew the steps. It was in a dark and deeply unfortunate way, almost comfortable in its familiarity. Except that Ren Halsey said, Actually, officer, can I have 10 minutes with them first? Jovic looked at her. She looked back at him with an expression of complete, uncomplicated sincerity. He looked at her identification again. He looked at me. And then in a voice that was barely above a whisper, he leaned close enough that only I could hear. Be careful with this one, Vex, he said. They're not what they seem, and neither am I. It was not a warning to stay away. It was a warning to pay attention. And something else, an admission, a confession, wrapped in a warning, wrapped in advice I did not fully understand yet. He straightened up louder now. 10 minutes, he said. I will be at the end of the corridor. And then he walked away, which was the most surprising thing that had happened in a day full of surprising things. And I want to be clear that the bar for surprise had already been set extremely high. Ren turned to me. The man with the beard, whose name I still did not know, moved to stand beside her with the easy, unthinking coordination of 2 people who had spent a long time working together. The other 2, the tall one from the market stall and the shorter, patient one from the exit, drifted closer without making it look like they were drifting closer, which was professionally speaking impressive. Pim, still on the floor, had managed to sit up. One of the humans the tall one had, without being asked, helped him into a sitting position with surprising gentleness, which Pim appeared to find more unsettling than being on the floor. "Thank you," Pim said stiffly. "Sure," the tall one said. Pim stared at him. "Why are you being kind to me? I tried to rob your colleague." "You tried," the tall one said with a small smile. Keyword. "I feel this is mockery." "It's really not." I looked at Ren. "What do you want?" She tilted her head slightly the way humans do when they are considering how to say something. "How long have you been working this quarter?" she asked. "That is a strange opening for whatever conversation this is." "6 rotations," Pim said immediately, because Pim has never in his life understood the concept of staying quiet when it might benefit him. Ren nodded. "And before that?" "Lower dock level," I said. "Before that, the transit hub on the East Ring. Before that, various locations on the second tier." "You move around," the bearded man said. It was not a question. "Staying in one place is how you get caught," I said. "Except you are caught," Pim pointed out. "Pim, I will leave you on this floor." "You cannot. You do not have the leverage. I outweigh you significantly." "I have 4 arms." "This is true," Pim admitted. "Continue." Ren looked between us with an expression that I was starting to recognize as her default setting. Faintly amused, fully attentive, giving nothing away about what she was actually thinking. It was an excellent expression. I respected it professionally while finding it deeply irritating on a personal level. "Scavel have 4 arms," she said. "Bushamo. Perfect fine motor coordination. 17 spectrum vision. You can read heat signatures, which means you can tell when someone's pulse elevates, which basically means you can detect anxiety in real time." "Yes," I said slowly. "And yet you're stealing bags in the lower market corridor of a mid-tier trade station." The way she said it was not cruel. It was not contemptuous. It was somehow worse than either of those things. It was simply plainly factual, delivered with the tone of someone reading a sum that does not add up. "Work is work," I said. "It is," she agreed, "until it isn't." The bearded man reached into a pocket and produced a small data card. He held it out toward me without stepping closer, letting me decide whether to take it or not. It was a small thing, that choice. But it was deliberate. I took the card. On it was a name, a registration number, a channel frequency. "That's our contractor contact," Ren said. "We work with the Galactic Commerce Authority's Security Division. Private contract, non-governmental, which means the pay is better and the bureaucracy is significantly less likely to make you want to disassemble yourself." I looked at the card. "You are offering me a job." "I'm offering you a conversation about it, Chumama," she said. "There's a difference." "This is insane," Pim said from the floor. "You would not be included in the conversation," the tall human told him not unkindly. "We've seen your file. You're a liability." Pim opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That is," he started. "Accurate," the bearded man suggested. A very long pause. "Deeply hurtful," Pim said, "but also accurate." I turned the data card over in my fingers. "There is something you should understand about being a scabble with 17 spectrum vision in a situation like this one. I could see things that other species could not. I could see the heat of Ren Halsey's pulse at her wrist. Calm, steady, unhurried. I could see the micro-expressions that passed across the bearded man's face when she spoke. Something that looked like confidence. The confidence of someone who has made this offer before and knows how it tends to land. I could see that they were not lying, which was in its own way deeply inconvenient, because lying would have made this much simpler to dismiss. My eyes were beginning to ache. I had been using maximum spectrum vision almost continuously since I first spotted Ren in the corridor. 17 spectrum sight is not meant for sustained use. The neural load is considerable. I could feel the beginnings of fatigue building behind my optical processors. I blinked, cycling down to normal vision for a moment to give my systems a rest. "Why Bantoyam?" I asked. "Why Paul?" Ren said. "Why me? There are better candidates. Species with more raw physical capability. Mercenaries with cleaner records. Actual security professionals who did not just attempt to rob you in a public corridor 20 minutes ago." 32 minutes ago, the tall human corrected. "Thank you. That is very helpful." Ren looked at me for a moment. Not through me, not past me, at me in the way that made you feel like she was reading something that you had not consciously written. "Because the best security consultants aren't the ones who follow the rules from the start," she said. "They're the ones who understand how the rules get broken, what gaps look like from the outside, how someone moves when they don't want to be seen. You spent 15 years learning how to find weaknesses in security systems." I want someone who can find them from the other side. The corridor was quiet around us. Somewhere distant, I could hear the ambient hum of the station, the low constant sound of thousands of people and machines and systems all functioning simultaneously, the background noise of a place that never fully slept. The other side, I repeated. You'd be finding the people doing what you were doing, identifying vulnerabilities, advising on coverage patterns, using that heat signature vision for something that doesn't end with Officer Jovic knowing your name. I looked down at the card again. Jovic knowing my name is a professional relationship. It is a professional relationship where he keeps a file on you, she said. There's a version of this where you stop being in the file and start being the one who reads it. Pim made a sound behind me. I glanced back at him. He was looking at me with an expression I did not often see on his face. Something that was not his usual easy cynicism, but something quieter. Something that looked, if I had to name it, like the expression of someone who was tired. Not surprised, just tired. Say yes, Vex, he said. I turned around, fully. What? Say yes. He shifted his bound wrist, clearly uncomfortable, and he looked up at me from the floor with absolute sincerity. I am going to tell you something, and I want you to understand that I mean it entirely without any ulterior motive. That is the most alarming opening statement you have ever made. I have been lying on this floor for 40 minutes, he said. I have had time to think. We are not good at this, Vex. We are not bad, but we are not good. And there is a difference between those two things that matters. And I think we have known that for a while, and we have been choosing not to look at it directly. I stared at him. He stared back. Also, he added, my wrists hurt, and I would like someone to let me up, and I feel like saying yes to these humans is the fastest way to make that happen. There it is, the tall human said. The ulterior motive, I said. Entirely without, I did not say without any. There are levels. Ren laughed. The warm one again, the real one. And I noticed that when she laughed, the bearded man beside her smiled. Not at her, but at the situation. The way someone smiles at a thing they genuinely enjoy. And I thought for the first time that these were not people performing a recruitment pitch. These were people who actually liked their work, who were underneath the professional competence and the entirely unnecessary ability to put a thorac on the floor in under 2 seconds enjoying themselves. There is something very difficult to say no to about people who genuinely enjoy what they do. But I was not ready, not yet. I have conditions, I said. Everyone does, Ren said. And I wanted on the record that your approach in this corridor today was, from a technical standpoint, excellent. The positioning of your team was very clean. The bait construction was well executed. The way you used the bag's visual weight to imply valuable contents without making it look deliberate was particularly good. She raised an eyebrow. I am critiquing your technique, I said, since you critiqued mine. For just a moment, something crossed her face that was not the practiced calm, or the amusement, or the professional assessment. Something that looked like genuine unguarded surprise. And then she smiled. Not the all-teeth one, something smaller and more real. Fair enough, she said, but then her expression changed. The smile faded. And what replaced it was something I had not seen yet. Urgency. She reached into the bag that had started all of this, and pulled out a small object. A data chip standard format, but with a crack running along one edge and scorch marks that suggested it had been somewhere it should not have been. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to believe me because we don't have much time. I looked at the chip, then at her. What is that proof, she said. Evidence I pulled from a cargo terminal 3 days ago, encrypted, partially damaged, but readable enough to scare the people who put it there. Proof of what? Ren Halsey looked at me with those dark, steady eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was very quiet and very serious. Someone is planning to kill 40,000 people on this station, she said, and we have 72 hours to stop them. The corridor seemed to get very still around us. I could see her pulse with my 17 spectrum vision, which I had unconsciously cycled back to maximum despite the growing fatigue. It had not changed. Still steady, still calm. She was not lying. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because that chip has data I can't read. Degraded sectors, corrupted files, but your vision. She looked at me with something that might have been hope. You see heat signatures, thermal residue, things that leave traces in spectrums I can't access. I think you can read what's left on this chip. I think you can help me figure out who's behind this before it's too late. And if I say no, then I'll find another way, she said simply, but it will take longer, and I don't know if we have longer. I looked at the chip in her hand, at the scorch marks, at the crack that suggested someone had tried very hard to destroy it and had almost succeeded. I looked at Pym still on the floor, watching me with an expression I could not quite read. I looked at the three other humans, all of them silent now, all of them watching. And I looked at Ren Halsey, who had put a Thoric on the floor in 2 seconds and was now asking me, a thief she had caught literally 32 minutes ago, to help her save 40,000 lives. It was insane. It was impossible. It was probably a trap of some kind, but I took the chip from her hand. 72 hours, I said. 72 hours, she confirmed. And then we discussed the job offer. Deal. She looked at the bearded man, who nodded once and moved toward Pym to undo the restraints. The tall human and the patient one began moving back to their original positions with the easy discipline of people standing down from readiness without making a production of it. Officer Jovic was already walking back down the corridor. He looked at the situation, at Pym being helped to his feet, at me standing upright and apparently unrestrained and apparently in some sort of dialogue with the humans he had just given 10 minutes to. And he stopped. Well, he said. Officer, I said, are you being arrested? I looked at Ren. She looked at me. Not today, she said. Jovic took a very long, very slow breath. He pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked at the ceiling, then at the floor, then at some middle distance that contained, I suspected, the ghost of the life choices that had led him to this moment. I am going to write a very confusing report, he said. You are very good at those, I said. I have read several. You have read, he started, the ones about me, professionally, for research purposes. He looked at Ren one more time. She gave him a small nod that contained within it what appeared to be a complete and silent conversation about authorization and jurisdiction and mutual professional respect. Or perhaps, I thought, remembering his whispered warning, something else entirely. And Officer Jovic Agreni, who had seen 15 years of the lowest quarters of Vorik Neth, put his restraint unit away and walked back toward the security hub without saying another word. I watched him go. The lower market corridor was already returning to its usual state, vendors resuming their calls, foot traffic beginning to flow again. The brief interruption folding back into the general noise of the station, the way a dropped stone folds back into still water. Only now I was standing here with a data chip in my hand that allegedly contained proof of mass murder, a job offer from humans I had met 35 minutes ago, and the distinct feeling that my life had just changed in ways I could not yet fully comprehend. Ren settled the bag back on her shoulder. Come on, she said. I'll buy you something to eat, and we can talk about what comes next. And Vex Thalen, 15-year veteran of the lower corridors of the galactic criminal ecosystem, 4 arms and 17 spectrum eyes, and a professional record that Officer Jovic had apparently memorized, made what might have been either the best or worst decision of his life. He followed her. Pym walked beside him, rubbing his wrists, and said very quietly, I want it noted that I called this outcome. You did not call this outcome. You said say yes so they would untie you. Vex, those are not mutually exclusive. The tall human walking on Pym's other side made a sound that was suspiciously close to a laugh and covered it with a cough. Pym looked up at him with an expression of narrow-eyed suspicion. You think this is funny, Pym said. Little bit, the tall human said. Pym considered this. Fine, he said. It is a little funny. And somewhere behind them, in the lower market corridor of Vorkneth, a station that had seen more than its share of things it would rather not have, the ambient hum continued, and the traders called their wares, and the foot traffic moved in its usual patterns. And for the first time in a long time, Vex Thalen did not know what came next. He found to his very great surprise that this felt less like danger and more like the beginning of something worth paying attention to. The data chip in his pocket felt heavier than it should have been. 72 hours, she had said. The countdown had already begun. The human concept of a meal, I was learning, involved far more ritual than I had anticipated. We were sitting in what Ren called a diner, which as far as I could tell was a feeding establishment that had given up on atmosphere in favor of efficiency and grease. The tables were bolted to the floor. The lighting was the kind of harsh overhead illumination that made everyone look slightly ill. The air smelled like reclaimed protein and something that might have been coffee, but which my translator insisted on calling liquid regret. It was, in other words, perfect for not being noticed. Ren sat across from me, the bag at her feet, a plate of something vaguely cylindrical and brown in front of her. Pym was next to me, nursing his wrists, and a cup of what he claimed was tea, but which looked like it had been strained through a maintenance filter. The bearded man, whose name I had finally learned was Garrett Stone, stood near the entrance, arms crossed, watching the corridor outside through the scratched plasteel window. The other two members of Ren's team had dispersed to what she called overwatch positions, which I assumed meant they were lurking somewhere nearby in case things went wrong. Professional paranoia, I could respect that. Okay, Ren said, pushing her plate aside and pulling out the damaged data chip. Let's talk about what we know. She placed the chip on the table between us. In the harsh overhead light, the scorch marks looked worse. The crack along the edge had spider-webbed further. Whatever had tried to destroy this thing had come very close to succeeding. 3 days ago, she said, I was doing a routine cargo inspection on the upper docks. Standard work, boring work, the kind of thing that pays the bills while you wait for something interesting to happen. And something interesting happened, I said. Something interesting tried to kill me. That got my attention. Pim's too, apparently, because he set down his tea with a small clinking sound. Ren continued, I found a discrepancy in a manifest. Nothing major, just a weight differential that didn't add up. 200 kilos listed as mining equipment that scanned as something else entirely. What kind of something else? I asked. Charges, Garrett said from the window, not turning around. High-yield thermal demolition charges, military grade, the kind you use to bring down reinforced structures or, say, compromise station infrastructure. I flagged it, Ren said. Sent the report up the chain. Standard protocol. And 6 hours later, someone tried to vent the inspection bay while I was still in it. She said this calmly. The way you might mention that it had rained yesterday. I stared at her. You seem remarkably composed about nearly dying, I said. It wasn't the first time, she said. Won't be the last, comes with the job. There was something in the way she said it. Not bravado, not false modesty, just simple acceptance of a fact about her life that she had long since made peace with. Humans, I was beginning to realize, had a very different relationship with mortality than most species I had encountered. I got out, she continued, barely, but not before I grabbed this. She tapped the data chip. It was connected to the cargo terminal. Someone had been using it to alter the manifest remotely. I pulled it, they tried to fry it, and she gestured at the damage. Here we are. You think this contains proof of who altered the manifests? I said. I think this contains a lot more than that. She looked at me with those dark, steady eyes. I think this contains a complete plan, targets, timelines, names, everything. And you need my vision to read it. Yes. I picked up the chip, turning it over in my hands. All 4 of them. The weight was negligible. The implications were not. If I do this, I said slowly, if I help you read this chip and it contains what you think it contains, we are not just preventing a theft or stopping a smuggling operation. We are walking into something significantly more dangerous. Yes, Ren said. People already tried to kill you once. Yes. They will try again. Probably. And you are asking me, a thief you caught? I glanced at Pim. How long has it been? Approximately 1 hour and 12 minutes, Pim said. 1 hour and 12 minutes ago, you are asking me to put myself in the path of people who use military-grade demolition charges and attempt to vent inspection bays with people still in them. Ren nodded. Why would I do that? I asked. And here she leaned forward, not threateningly, not pleadingly, just enough to close the distance between us to make the moment feel smaller and more immediate. Because you're still here, she said quietly. You could have walked away. You could have told Jovic to arrest us for harassment and filed a formal complaint. You could have taken the out I gave you, but you didn't. You're sitting here asking questions, holding that chip in your hand like you're already trying to figure out how to read it. She was right. I hated that she was right. 40,000 people, she said. That's what's at stake. Families, workers, people who came to this station looking for a better life or just trying to survive. And someone has decided that they're expendable, that their lives are worth less than whatever profit or political advantage this plan will generate. She paused. I can't read this chip, she said. I don't have the vision. I don't have your skills, but you do. And I think somewhere under all that professional cynicism and 15 years of survival instinct, you know that matters. The diner was very quiet. Somewhere in the background, I could hear the hum of the recyclers and the distant murmur of conversation from other patrons. But at our table, there was only silence and the weight of a decision I had probably already made but had not yet admitted to myself. I looked at Pim. He shrugged. Do not look at me for guidance. I am the one who got zip-tied. Very helpful. I contain multitudes, he said. I looked back at Ren. If I do this, I said, I want your word that when this is over, we have that conversation about the job. A real conversation. Not an interrogation. Not a recruitment pitch. A conversation between professionals. Deal, she said immediately. And if I find something on this chip that you do not like, if it implicates people you do not want implicated, you do not bury it to make your life easier. I wouldn't, she said. And the way she said it flat and certain made me believe her. All right, I said, let's see what you've got. Reading a damaged data chip with 17 spectrum vision is not, as it turns out, a quick process. We relocated to what Ren called a secure location, which turned out to be a storage unit 3 levels down from the lower market corridor. It was small, cramped, and smelled like someone had been storing fermented grain products, but it had the advantage of being off the main sensor grid and accessible through 6 different corridors, which made it defensible. Garrett had set up a makeshift workstation using equipment that looked like it had been assembled from parts scavenged from at least 4 different species technology. There was a display screen that flickered at irregular intervals, a power source that hummed ominously, and a reader that Ren assured me would interface with the chip despite looking like it had been put together with wire and optimism. Human engineering, I said, looking at the contraption. If it's stupid but it works, Ren said, it's not stupid. That is not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be thin. She plugged the chip into the reader. The screen flickered to life, showing corrupted data structures and broken file pathways. To anyone without specialized vision, it would have been useless. But I had 17 spectrum eyes. I leaned closer, focusing my vision through the different frequency ranges. Thermal, electromagnetic, residual energy signatures from when the chip had been active before the damage. And slowly, like a picture developing in chemical solution, I began to see patterns. There, I said, pointing, that section. It's corrupted in the visible spectrum, but there's thermal residue from the original data. If I can trace the heat pattern, I went quiet focusing. The process required maximum intensity 17 spectrum vision. Every neural pathway dedicated to visual processing was engaged. It was like reading a book where every letter was written in a different color of invisible ink, and I had to switch between 17 different colored lights to see each one. It was exhausting. After 20 minutes, my eyes began to ache. A dull throb behind my optical processors that I recognized as the early stages of neural fatigue. After 30 minutes, the ache became sharp. You need to stop, Ren asked quietly. No, I said. I can keep going. How long can you maintain that kind of visual intensity? Under normal circumstances, maybe 6 hours before I need to rest. But I have been using enhanced vision almost continuously since I first saw you in the corridor. And this, I gestured at the chip, this is more intense than normal operation. How much longer do you have? I did a quick mental calculation. Best guess, another 12 to 14 hours of maximum intensity work before the system overloads. After that, I will need several hours of complete visual rest to recover. Ren nodded, filing the information away. I kept working. Got something, I said finally. Ren moved closer. What? Cargo manifests, dozens of them, all showing the same discrepancy you found. Mining equipment that scans as demolition charges. How many charges? I traced the thermal signatures, reconstructing the numbers from the heat ghost of deleted data. Enough to compromise structural integrity of, I paused recounting, sections 7 through 12. The room went very still. That's the entire lower residential district, Garrett said quietly. How many people? Ren asked. In those sections, I looked at her. Approximately 42,000, accounting for shift workers and transient population. Ren's jaw tightened. What else? I focused again, digging deeper into the corrupted files. And that's when I saw it. The timeline. They're not planning a single attack, I said slowly. They're planning a sequence. Multiple venting events disguised as maintenance failures. The first one triggers a lockdown. The second happens during the evacuation. The third would catch everyone trying to escape, Ren finished. Exactly. When? Garrett asked. I traced the thermal residue of the timestamp data. There's a countdown, I said, automated, set to begin when certain conditions are met. Based on the thermal decay patterns I estimate, I did the calculations. 68 hours from now. 68 hours, not 72. 68. Ren had been working on incomplete information. Why? Pim said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. Why would someone do this? What is the purpose? Money, Garrett said. Has to be. Station insurance policies pay out massive claims for catastrophic structural failures. But they'd investigate, I said. They'd find evidence of sabotage. Not if the charges are designed to look like maintenance equipment failures, Ren said. Not if the initial manifests were altered to show legitimate cargo. And not if the people doing the investigating are the same people who filed the claim. The pieces were fitting together in a pattern I did not like. Inside job, I said. Has to be, Wren agreed. Someone high enough to alter official records. Someone with access to procurement and inspection schedules. Someone who could arrange for the charges to be brought in without triggering security protocols. Someone in station administration, Garrett said. We all looked at each other. This was no longer just about stopping a terrorist attack. This was about exposing corruption at the highest levels of station governance. The kind of corruption that had resources influence and a vested interest in making sure anyone who discovered the truth did not live long enough to share it. We need to get this to coalition authorities, I said. Someone outside the station command structure. Can't, Wren said. Communications are monitored. If we send this out, whoever's behind it will know we have the evidence. They'll accelerate the timeline or destroy the proof or kill us, Pym supplied helpfully. Yes, Pym, thank you. I am a realist. Wren started pacing. It was a small room, so the pacing was more of a back and forth shuffle, but the energy was the same. We need physical access to the environmental control system, she said. We need to disable the charges before they can be triggered, and we need irrefutable proof of who's behind this so the coalition can't ignore it. That is 3 very difficult things, I observed. Yeah. In 68 hours. Yeah. With people actively trying to kill us. You're really good at summarizing problems, she said. It is a gift. She stopped pacing and looked at me. Can you read more, she asked. Names specific individuals involved. I focused on the chip again, pushing my vision despite the growing fatigue. And there, buried in the deepest layer of corrupted data, I found something. A personnel file. A name. I went very, very still. Vex, Wren said. What is it? I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat had gone tight. Because the name I was looking at was one I recognized. One I had not seen in 10 years. One I thought I would never see again. There's a coordinator listed, I said quietly. Someone managing the logistics. Procurement, placement of the charges. Who? Garrett asked. I looked up at Wren. Drask Thalen, I said. The name hung in the air like smoke. You know him, Wren said. It wasn't a question. Yes. How tired. I set down the chip very carefully as if it might explode if handled roughly. He's my father, I said. Silence. Then Pym said very quietly, oh. Wren's expression had gone completely neutral, the kind of neutral that takes effort to maintain. Your father, she repeated. Yes. Who you haven't mentioned in the... She glanced at a chronometer. 2 hours we've known each other. It did not seem relevant, I said. Didn't seem... She stopped, took a breath. Vex, your father is coordinating a mass murder. That seems pretty relevant. I have not seen him in 10 years, I said. I thought he was gone. He left when I was young, walked away from our family without explanation. I assumed he was dead. Clearly not, Garrett observed. Clearly not, I agreed. Wren was still watching me with that unnervingly direct gaze. This changes things, she said. Does it? You tell me. Can you do this if it means turning in your father? I thought about that. About the man who had raised me for the first 15 years of my life and then vanished. About the lessons he had taught me. About the last time I had seen him standing in the doorway of our living space with a bag in his hands and an expression I had never been able to decipher. I don't know him anymore, I said finally. The person who left was someone I cared about. The person coordinating the murder of 40,000 people is a stranger wearing a familiar face. That doesn't answer my question, Wren said. Yes, I said. It does. If he's involved in this, he needs to be stopped. Same as anyone else. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, she said, then we move forward. We have 68 hours to find those charges, disable them, and get proof to someone who can do something about it. Small problem, Pym said. We do not know where the charges are, just that they were delivered as mining equipment. Mining equipment gets stored in the industrial cargo bays, Garrett said. Section 9. But that's dozens of warehouses, hundreds of containers. We'd need weeks to search them all. We don't have weeks, Wren said. We have 68 hours and counting. I was still looking at the chip, at the corrupted data, at the thermal ghost of my father's name. And something occurred to me. The manifest, I said. Everyone looked at me. The original manifest showed mining equipment, I said, but they were altered to hide the real cargo. Which means somewhere in the system, there's a record of what was actually delivered and where it was stored. A record that was deleted but might still have thermal residue in the database. The Central Cargo Management System, Garrett said. It's in the administration tower? Section 1. Heavily secured, Ren said. Armed guards, biometric locks, sensor grids. Also, I said exactly the kind of place where people with 17 spectrum vision and 15 years of thieving experience excel. Ren looked at me, then smiled. Not the big one, the small genuine one. You're saying we break in, she said. I am saying we recover deleted data from a secured system in order to locate military-grade explosives before they can be used to kill 40,000 people. If we happen to bypass some security measures in the process, well, semantics. I like how you think, she said. I am beginning to suspect I will regret enabling this, Pym muttered. Breaking into the administration tower required planning, timing, precision. We had 4 hours to prepare. Ren's team worked with the kind of efficient coordination that comes from long practice. Garrett pulled up schematics of the tower from publicly available architectural databases. The tall human whose name I learned was Marcus scouted the exterior approach routes. The patient one, a woman named Lynn, hacked into the shift schedule database to identify the optimal entry window. And Ren sat with me going over every detail of the thermal scanning process I would need to perform once we were inside. The deleted data will have been overwritten, she explained, sketching diagrams on a datapad. But thermal residue persists for up to 2 weeks depending on server temperature and access frequency. I know, I said. That is how I read the chip. I know you do. I'm just making sure we're on the same page about what we're looking for. Control issues, I suggested. Survival instinct, she corrected. I've done this kind of work before. It goes wrong fast when people aren't synchronized. You have done this before, I said, breaking into secured facilities to prevent mass casualties. Couple times. That is a very specific skill set, she shrugged. I'm a very specific person. There was something in the way she said it, something that suggested a history I was not privy to, stories that had shaped her into someone who could put a thorac on the floor in 2 seconds and then calmly plan a high-security infiltration over bad coffee in a storage unit. How did you end up doing this, I asked. Security consulting for stations that would rather not pay for adequate protection. Long story. We have 4 hours. She was quiet for a moment, then set down the datapad. I grew up on cargo ships, she said. Family business. My parents ran freight between the outer colonies and the core systems. Legitimate work, mostly. Some gray area stuff when times were tight. Most freight operations have gray areas, I said. Yeah, well, when I was 16, we took a contract that turned out to be less gray and more black. Weapons smuggling. We didn't know until we were already in transit. She paused. Coalition intercepted us. My parents tried to talk their way out. The people who hired us decided talking was a liability. They triggered a remote charge in the cargo hold. Her voice was very even, very controlled. I was in the cockpit when it happened. My parents were in the hold trying to secure the cargo. They didn't make it out. I did not know what to say to that. Pym, sitting quietly in the corner, said nothing either. After that, Ren continued, I bounced around, did some Freyo work on my own, got recruited by a security firm that needed someone who understood how smuggling operations worked from the inside. Turned out I was good at it. Turned out I liked stopping the kind of people who killed my parents more than I liked hauling cargo. She looked at me. So when I found those demolition charges 3 days ago, it wasn't just about the 40,000 people on this station. It was personal, because somewhere out there, someone made the same calculation my parents' contractors made. That lives are worth less than profit, and I can't let that stand. The storage unit was very quiet. I understand, I said, and I did, more than she knew, because I was thinking about my father, about the man who had taught me that theft could be clean, that you could take what you needed without hurting anyone, that there were lines you did not cross, and now he was on the other side of one of those lines, and I was going to have to cross it to stop him. All right, Ren said, standing up. Enough history. We've got 3 hours until the shift change. Let's go over the entry sequence one more time. The administration tower was in Section 1, which was the kind of designation that told you everything you needed to know about who considered themselves important on Voroknath. It was tall by station standards, 15 levels, and built with the kind of architectural presumption that suggested the designers had been more concerned with making a statement than with practical functionality. Lots of reflective surfaces, lots of unnecessary height in the atrium, lots of exposed structural elements that were meant to look industrial chic, but which mostly just created security vulnerabilities. We approached at 0200 station time during the graveyard shift when personnel were at minimum levels. Ren, Garrett, and I went in, Marcus and Lynn stayed outside maintaining overwatch and ready to create diversions if needed. Pim stayed at the storage unit monitoring communications channels for any indication that we had been detected. Try not to get arrested while I am gone, I told him. Try not to get shot while you are gone, he replied. Fair point. The entry was through a maintenance access on the third sublevel. Lynn had identified it as the least monitored route, which in practice meant it only had 2 sensor grids and 1 biometric lock instead of 6. Garrett bypassed the lock. It took him 40 seconds, which I found mildly insulting to the security designers. Sloppy, I commented. Says the guy who got caught stealing bags, he replied. That was a tactical error, not a technical failure. Keep telling yourself that. We moved through the sublevel corridors in single file. Garrett first, then Ren, then me. The human concept of point formation was apparently universal across species when it came to tactical movement. The corridors were dim, emergency lighting only. Our footsteps echoed on the metal deck plates despite our attempts at stealth. 2 guards at the main junction, Garrett whispered, holding up a hand. 60 meters ahead. Can we avoid them? Ren asked. Negative, only route to the server room. Then we go through, she said it so calmly, as if going through 2 armed guards was a minor logistical consideration rather than a significant tactical problem. Define through, I said. Non-lethal, she said. Quiet, fast. That is distressingly vague. You'll see. We moved closer. I could see the guards now with my enhanced vision. Heat signatures, pulse rates, attention patterns. They were bored, standing in a corridor at 0200 guarding a server room that no one had tried to access in months. Their situational awareness was poor. Professionals would have rotated positions, would have varied their scan patterns. These were not professionals. Ren moved first. She covered the distance in complete silence, and I mean complete, which should have been impossible on metal deck plates with standard footwear, and was on the first guard before he registered her presence. The guard went down without a sound, some kind of nerve strike that I did not fully see, but which resulted in immediate unconsciousness. The second guard was turning, reaching for his weapon when Garrett was on him. Same result. Different technique, but equally effective. 10 seconds. Both guards down. Non-lethal, Ren said, checking pulse points. Quiet. Fast. I feel I should be more concerned about how easy that was, I said. Station security is understaffed and underpaid. Garrett said, zip-tying the guards. This is what happens when administrators prioritize image over function. We moved past them down another corridor through a blast door that Garrett opened with what appeared to be a standard maintenance override code and finally into the server room. It was cold. Server rooms always are. Banks of computing equipment lined the walls, blinking with status lights in dozens of colors. The air hummed with the sound of cooling systems and data processing. There, Ren said, pointing to a central terminal. Cargo management database. I approached it while Ren and Garrett took up positions at the door. The terminal was locked, biometrically secured, but it was also connected to the main database, which meant it was generating heat. And heat leaves traces. I focused my vision cycling through spectrums until I found what I was looking for. My eyes ached immediately. The neural fatigue I had been managing was getting worse. I had been using enhanced vision, for I checked my internal chronometer, nearly 6 hours now. According to my earlier estimate, I had another 8 hours of maximum intensity work before system overload. I pushed through the discomfort. Thermal residue on the input panel, traces of body heat from the last person who accessed the system, fingerprint patterns in the infrared spectrum. Got the access code, I said. How? Ren asked. Heat signature from the last user's fingerprints. I can see which keys were pressed and in what order. That's incredible, she said. That's why you brought me, I replied. I entered the code. The terminal unlocked, and I was in. The cargo database was extensive, thousands of entries, deliveries, departures, storage assignments, manifest alterations. It would take days to search manually, but I did not need to search manually. I had 17 spectrum vision. I focused on the deleted data sectors, the parts of the database where information had been removed, but where thermal echoes remained. The pain behind my eyes intensified, sharp, insistent. I ignored it. And there, like ghosts in the machine, I saw them. Deleted manifests, altered timestamps, storage locations. Found them, I said. Where? Ren asked, moving closer. I traced the thermal patterns reconstructing the data. Section 9, Industrial Cargo Bay, Warehouse 47, container designations, Delta through November. That's 8 containers, Garrett said. 8 containers full of military-grade demolition charges. I confirmed. Enough to compromise the entire structural support network for sections 7 through 12. Ren was already on her comm contacting Marcus and Lynn. We need to get to section 9, she said. Disable those charges before the lights went out, all of them. The server room went completely dark. And in the darkness, I heard the unmistakable sound of blast doors sealing. We were locked in. Contact, Garrett said quietly. His weapon was already drawn. Multiple heat signatures coming from both corridors. I focused my vision. Through the walls, I could see them. 6 figures, armed, moving with tactical precision that the guards we had bypassed had lacked entirely. These were not station security. These were professionals. They knew we were coming, Ren said. Someone tipped them off, Garrett agreed. Or someone's been monitoring the database for access attempts, I said, waiting for anyone to look for those deleted manifests. The blast doors began to open. Slowly, deliberately, giving us time to understand how trapped we were. And then from the darkness beyond, a voice spoke, a voice I had not heard in 10 years. Hello, Vex, my father said. I was wondering when you would show up.